Well, good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for Values-Based Self-Care for the holiday season and beyond. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since we're virtual, you never know what might happen, like that slide at the beginning that had the wrong virtual session. Please excuse any technical issues that may pop up, please. If you have any problems with your video or audio, click the reconnect button to get back into the webinar right away. As we begin, I'd like to ask our audience a question. Which self-care practice do you find most aligns with your personal values? Here are your options. And again, it's the most aligns with your personal values. Your options are mindfulness and meditation, physical exercise, spending quality time with loved ones, engaging in hobbies or creative activities, or volunteer or helping others. We're going to go ahead and leave this up for a few moments so you have a chance to submit your response. For our live participants, we are recording today's webinar. Once it's uploaded onto our website, you'll get an email link with the replay. Today, we are excited to welcome Dr. Kaylee Crockett to the webinar series. Dr. Crockett is a clinical health psychologist and assistant professor of family and community medicine at UAB. She earned her Master of Psychology in 2014 and PhD in Social and Behavioral Science in 2017, both from the University of Connecticut. And we won't hold that against her, considering what happened on the football field the other day. So before we begin, I just want to share the results of our poll. And it's looking like 40% say that spending quality time with loved ones most aligns with their personal values. Second is physical exercise. Third is tied, engaging in hobbies or creative activities, and volunteering or helping others. We're going to end that poll, and we do want to go ahead and toss another one up as we begin. And this one, as we turn things over to Dr. Crockett, what is the biggest challenge in maintaining self-care during the holiday season? And I'm excited to see what people say about this one. Lack of time, financial stress, family obligations, travel commitments, or other. And if you want to toss other into the chat, that is fine. We're going to go ahead and keep this poll up for a bit to let you answer. And now I'd officially like to welcome Dr. Crockett to our webinar series and turn things over to her. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Well, thank you all for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here to talk about this topic of value-based self-care. And I'm just going to take a peek back at this poll because I'm so excited to see what folks are seeing as the biggest challenges to their self-care routine, especially during the holiday season.
Lack of time, number one right now. Financial stress, number two. And it's not even close. 57% lack of time.
Okay. Lack of time. Financial, other obligations, and commitments. Okay. Well, it wouldn't be a self-care presentation without giving us a little bit of time to kind of center ourselves and be here and kind of connect with the reasons maybe you decided to sign on to this webinar or what you're excited to check out about this. So I want us to just take a minute. Maybe, we've all had a busy day or morning taking care of things. So let's just take a moment to pause and take a deep breath, maybe the biggest breath you've taken yet today. And you can say this to yourself or even say it out loud, be here. So let's tune in and begin. A little agenda of what we're going to cover today. So we're going to talk a little bit about just what self-care is. I'm sure a lot of us have ideas about what self-care is, but we'll go ahead and define it so we all get on the same page about that. We'll talk about why we need it, the imperative of self-care, challenges and myths around self-care, and as we addressed in the poll, talk about this idea of value-based self-care and what bringing values kind of into the discussion around self-care can add. We'll differentiate values from goals, go over a few different value identification activities, and then talk a little bit more specifically about us getting into the holiday season as we timed this event as we approach that very closely. Okay, so I'd like to open up for some responses in the chat, if we can. What is your idea about self-care? What is it? What are you coming in thinking about the definition of self-care? What does it mean to you? Okay, so I see being aware of taking care of yourself. So there's some awareness or some intention there. Taking time for oneself. Staying healthy physically and mentally. So whole person self-care. Just simple taking care of yourself. Taking care of yourself and not feeling selfish about it. So taking the selfishness out of self-care. Doing things you need to do to feel good mentally, physically, etc. Listening to your body. Recuperation, optimizing well-being. These are all really great definitions of self-care. Thank you all for your contributions. Ignoring politics. Yes, I will point out this is also an aptly timed presentation given our socio-political climate at the moment. All right, so if we were to try to kind of pull together a definition of self-care, and self-care is many things, we're going to talk about that. In fact, I would argue it's almost everything that we do. But self-care is taking the time to do the things, and we're going to come back to this idea of the things that help you live well, improve your health and well-being, and cope with stress. And I imagine a lot of us come to this presentation on self-care thinking, of course, self-care is about ourselves. It's kind of an individual type of thing. But I also really like this World Health Organization definition of self-care, where they broaden it beyond oneself or the individual. So WHO defines self-care as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. And then I pulled this image from the International Self-Care Foundation, which has lots of information about self-care, but self-care is really the foundation of everything we do to live well. And then building on self-care, we might go see medical professionals from there. But I think this idea of just, it's the foundation. It is important. It keeps us well, as folks defined. It's all the activities we do day to day to stay well physically, mentally, and beyond. All right, so we have defined self-care, but why is the self-care topic so important? Why do we talk about it all the time? Why do we encourage each other to take care of ourselves all the time? Why? This is a busy image, but I pulled it from a paper that came out in 2018 by Blair Johnston and Becky Akubchuk, where they synthesized the literature from health psychology over the past 50 years to kind of synthesize and build out our understanding of how stress affects our overall health and maybe leads to chronic health conditions. And we can look at this, and what stress is when we perceive that our ability to cope with a certain stressor, whether that be socio-political events, observing social inequality, environmental adversity, traumatic events that may have happened to us currently or in the past, other day-to-day stressors that pop up. When our perceived ability to deal with those stressors, or we feel like we don't have the resource to deal with them, our alarm bells go off and we experience stress. And that stress response is moderated. So this is hopeful. It's moderated by our resources. So these may be internal biological resources, but they're also moderated by our sense of meaning or purpose, resources for social support, as well as our coping abilities. Like, what have we learned thus far that helps us get through stressors? So this is hopeful. Going through our prolonged stress response to leading downstream to these physiological changes, health behaviors, mood and emotional changes into chronic disease processes, or that could happen. What's also really hopeful about this picture, as you can see in the intervention opportunities underneath, there is always room for intervention and building out these coping skills, building resilience and behavior change. And this is what I see as the importance of self-care, that by engaging in self-care, we really fortify ourselves to our response to stress. And stressors are simply a part of life. And the best we can do is prepare ourselves to deal with them. So this is really why it is imperative to deal with plan for and include self-care as a regular part of our routine, and protect our time for it, because it helps us in dealing with all of the things that come along in life. So that is our imperative and why we're all here talking about self-care. All right, so we thankfully have already had our poll and talking about some of the challenges to self-care, which sound by and large like lack of time really gets in the way, or lack of financial resources. And then I saw also in the chat, like maybe mental health stuff gets in the way. In the wintertime, it gets really hard to kind of get up the motivation to take care of ourselves. We might find ourselves kind of just checking out instead of really taking care of ourselves. That's certainly a challenge. Or feeling like we don't have the resources for self-care. If we don't have supportive people around us to spend quality time with, or who can help support us. I also want to talk about some of the myths around self-care that I believe really get in the way of us prioritizing self-care. So this came up also in the chat, that self-care is not selfish, but a lot of us have this belief that taking time for ourselves is indulgent or selfish, or it's taking our time that we should be spending on other types of priorities that are not ourselves. We also tend to believe that self-care is only when we have free time. Going to that kind of lack of time being a huge barrier. We kind of wait for the time to arise of like, oh, I have, this vacation time or what have you. Now I will attend to my self-care. A lot of folks perceive self-care to be really expensive, right? If we're not going to spend a full day at a spa, then what's the point of self-care? Some of us, kind of going back to definitions, tend to think about self-care as a solitary activity. That's certainly a myth. Doing self-care alongside others or with others, or simply spending time with quality time with supportive others is certainly a self-care activity. And then I think self-care has gotten a little bit of a bad rap because, of course, it's been co-opted by marketing, and it seems to only be getting out to certain groups that, yes, self-care and wellness is for you, and that's simply not true. Self-care is for everyone. That is very important to keep in mind. It is not just for women. It's not just for folks of certain races or backgrounds. It is certainly for everyone. And of course, certain groups face more adversity than others and must center self-care in their lives in order to live with that and manage that. All right, so and going along with these myths, again, I think when a lot of us, when we call self-care to mind, we might imagine the picture that's on our left, that if we're not on a beach somewhere getting a 90-minute massage, then it's not self-care, which is simply not true. Self-care can happen in many ways. And I think also what unfortunately happens is we all get so burdened with things going on in our life and responsibilities and duties to others and duties to our work, people we care for, etc., that when we get that time to take care of ourselves, we're almost completely checking out and kind of avoiding everything and maybe looking like the picture on our right, where we're kind of more distracting ourselves rather than engaging in things that would help us stay well. And I want to come back around to this idea of the things we do that help us lead well. So these are all the things that self-care can include. Self-care can be attending to our physical health, whether that be doing physical activity, maintaining a regular sleep schedule and keeping to that schedule, taking care of our emotional health by managing our stress well, practicing self and other forgiveness if that is relevant, practicing self-compassion, which is very important to the practice of self-care, establishing boundaries with others, but also engaging with our support systems and finding ways to do that, whether they are near or far away. Engaging in spiritual practices as those are relevant to us. Engaging in personal activities like journaling or expressive writing, engaging with hobbies, making our spaces feel safe and stress-free as much as possible places for us to be, taking care of our financial health, and also At work, we can protect our time and take care of ourselves there, establish boundaries around our time, and build positive working relationships and things like that to help take care of ourselves in our workplace, which can also be sources of stress, of course. And if I can reveal my thesis for a moment for this presentation, I really want us to keep in mind that self-care is not only for escaping what stresses us or ails us, but self-care is really about connecting with what matters to us the most. And here's where values come in. So we'll talk more about what values are and what they can add to this discussion, but values are really tools. They're tools for intentional self-care and helping us plan our self-care, identify activities that are most relevant to us and give us direction and our self-care routines. Another thing I really want folks to keep in mind about self-care is that everybody's self-care probably looks different. What works for one person may really love a spa day or a home spa day, whereas somebody may loathe that idea. So what works for one person as far as self-care certainly does not work for the next person. We all got to find the things that help recharge and rejuvenate and help us recover. So this idea of value-based self-care, based in values. So what values are our deepest desires for how we want to treat ourselves, how we want to treat others, and how we want to treat the world around us. Values are not achievable things. They are broad ideas that give us direction. And our values are personal. So your values don't have to look like the next person's values. But our values help us find inspiration, motivation, and guide us in making choices about our actions and things we do to make our lives feel more meaningful and more rewarding. And values are not goals, and we're going to differentiate those a little bit further in the next couple of slides. So I just want to point out some examples of what values are. This is a lot of different values, but this is certainly not an exhaustive list of values. There are many more, and values certainly are personal, and you may have values that are not focused here. This is just an example of what values identification can look like by writing out, one word or a couple of words of something meaningful to you. And then along with that word, kind of writing out like a little definition of what that value really means to you. So someone who really values being grateful, that might look like being appreciative of what I've received by either writing to people when you want to thank them, and expressing gratitude regularly, or having a little gratitude journal to practice that day to day. That's an example of acting in a way consistent with one's values. So just a few examples here. And then differentiating values from goals. So goals, differently from values, are achievable. Goals have a destination. You can identify like, yes, I have reached my goal. I can kind of check that off my list and then set the next goal. Whereas values, again, are not achievable. They, instead of having a destination, they give us direction towards a destination. So some examples here, these are not specific goals per se, but they do have a destination. So one goal might be to get a promotion at work. And some of the values underlying that goal could include maybe being cooperative with coworkers, being industrious or skillful, or really valuing leadership and a leadership role at work. We might have a goal to spend intentional time with our friends and maintain those relationships, in which case the values underlying that could include support or social support, love towards others, or being authentic. We might have a goal around financial stability, in which case we might have values being responsible or orderly. Travel more is always a big goal for folks. That might be aligned with values of being curious or adventurous. And lots of people have values around their physical health, maybe getting more physically active, in which case some example values might be self-care, self-support, or just overall health, whatever that means to someone, and however physical activity might align with that idea for health for individuals. So that's how we differentiate goals from values. So I want to take a moment to illustrate this a little bit further. So let's say we are thinking about taking a trip. And I want to differentiate a goal-focused approach versus a values-focused approach and some of the subtleties in this approach. So in example number 1, we're going to take this beach vacation. We've set this goal that this year we're going to go on a beach vacation. We get like whatever, a week of vacation time. We're going to take it, go to the beach. That's our goal. Haven't really thought much about why, just the beach sounded like a good place to go, and therefore we're going to go. So we load up in the car or go to the airport, get on the plane. We're ready for going on our beach vacation, feeling excited about it. We go on the trip, do all the things you do at the beach. We sit on the beach, go to the dinners, have all the seafood. Once the trip is over, the goal is done. And then we're, on the ride home, we're kind of like, well, now I'm feeling lousy about going back to work. My vacation's over. I met my goal. What's next? And it's not really connected to anything. So, the beach was great, and we kind of go back to work and keep going on. Whereas in example number 2, we got the same beach vacation planned. We're going to load up and head over to the beach with our family. But in this case, this beach vacation is really important because it aligns with our values of adventure. We're looking forward to all the different things we can get into at the beach, with some curiosity about what this beach has to offer, how it might be different from previous beach vacations that we've been on. And also we're taking our family along, and something really valuable is that quality time with family. And we are really looking forward to this beach vacation because it aligns with all of those values. So as we're headed towards the beach, we're talking about this and really looking forward to this and spending time together. And maybe we planned some activities ahead of time of how we're going to spend this quality together, and maybe all do our separate things during the day, but then come back and connect in the evenings to talk about all the adventures that we've been on, and enjoy all our adventures. And then on the way home, we keep talking about the trip and how much it really suited our sense of adventure, what curiosities we satisfied, how much we enjoyed spending time together, how it's related to all the previous vacations we've gone on, what we're going to do next time we get a vacation that might build on this travel experience. So you can see how values really kind of can enliven an experience. This, same scenario of taking a beach vacation, but really thinking about like the why, the meaning behind this vacation versus kind of doing it because we got the time off and let's just do it anyways. That's really kind of the difference in doing something that's a little more goal focused without attending to values versus doing something for the sake of our values. All right, so I just want to make a couple of notes and get us all on the same page that everyone's values are different. What matters to someone, even someone you feel close to, does not necessarily have to be what matters to you. Now, groups of people or folks in relationships with one another may come together and say, hey, let's find our shared values, and then find some activities to do together that help us suit those. Certainly, you can have your individual values and you can come together and make values as a family or as a friend group, as a workplace. Certainly that can be done. I also want to point out that values can change. They are not fixed. Things may happen in our life to make our values shift. And it's important to revisit our values. So we'll talk about some different activities to do to identify our values, but I want to highlight the importance of coming back to that and revisiting that. If that's kind of a once a year kind of resolution type of thing that you do, or some other interval, just to look at, are my values still the same, or am I looking at things differently now? And then also it's okay if we have different values in different areas of our life. My values at home may differ from what my values are at work, and that is perfectly okay. All right, so you're all welcome to take a screenshot of this or jot this down. We're going to walk through some value identification exercises that we can take out of here. You're also welcome to jot down a few ideas that come to mind now as you're sitting and have the time for this protected right now. So one values identification exercise that we'll do with folks is starting with just kind of a blank slate. So if you have a time in your day where your brain's really working, maybe you just got, your first cup of coffee or tea for the day or whatever kind of gets you going, sit down with a piece of paper or a journal and just let the brain juices flow. Have a little brainstorm session and write down a list of about 4 to 5 words or phrases that seem to be the most meaningful to you as you think about your life and how you want to live it. And then alongside those words or phrases, make a little definition, like on that previous slide with the example values, of what that value really means to you. If you're struggling with this blank slate approach, like, gosh, I really can't think of some words, you can always refer back to a list of values. I'm sure Google machine can come up with those, or there's some resources at the end to help find some of those. So you can consult a list of values to start getting the thoughts flowing about what a value for you might be. You can also ask yourself some of these prompts, like, what sort of person do I want to be? Or what personal strengths or attributes might I want to work on or cultivate? What do you want to stand for? And another question you can ask is, how would you like others to see you or describe you? And if that gets challenging and kind of centering yourself and this kind of brainstorming session, which it can be for some people to kind of put themselves there and really reflect on like what really matters to me. Another approach is thinking about people that you admire and what do you think that they stand for, or what is it about them specifically that you admire that might be speaking to your values. And if you happen to have a relationship with those people that you admire, it might be worth having a conversation about what is it that they perceive they stand for, and that could help one, strengthen that relationship, but also get you thinking about what your particular values are. So that's one values identification exercise. A couple of other different exercises I wanted to run through. One is called the Life Compass. So this kind of parses out the different domains of our life, and it is okay if all of these domains are not particularly relevant to you. But we go through these different domains and ask folks to write in each little box, and you can easily make this type of exercise on your own notebook or piece of paper. Just kind of write out the different domains of your life that come to mind as important to you. You're also welcome to take a picture of this and use it for another time. We'll have folks write out a couple of words or values within each of these boxes of thinking about your health, what really matters related to your health. And you'll see these little boxes within these life domain boxes. And let's say in the top little box on the right, we'll have folks rate on kind of a scale from 0 to 10, like how relevant is this domain or this set of values to you? So 0 being not relevant at all, to 10 being like, this is really relevant. I really want to pay attention and work on this. And then in the bottom box, we might have folks also rate on a scale of 0 to 10, thinking about this set of values, like how consistently do you feel like you're living your life according to these values? And rating that from a 0 being not consistent at all to 10. And if we were to look at this and we saw a domain that looks really important or relevant, but also really inconsistent, we would really kind of focus in on that and say, we got to work on this and get you to a point of feeling more consistent in this domain. And the reason we do that is because folks tend to experience a lot of distress when they feel like they're living out of sync with their values. And so we want to be sure to address that. Another approach to getting at this kind of consistency and living aligned with our values might be doing an activity like a values bullseye pictured here. So we have these different domains. Of course, these can be changed out depending on what domain of life really matters to you, but kind of looking at this bullseye activity and maybe making a couple of a little list of our values within these different domains, and then identifying, looking at the bullseye and kind of picking a point on here from the middle of the bullseye being, I feel like I'm totally living aligned with these values. I'm doing great day in, day out. Things might not always go according to plan, but generally I feel like I'm being consistent with them. So I feel good about that. Versus being at the outer kind of edges of the bullseye and feeling like I'm not being consistent here and I need to pay attention to this. So this can be another way to kind of assess where we are in terms of living aligned with what matters to us. So those are a couple of different values identification exercises we'll do. And then as far as kind of checking in with ourselves about how we're doing in terms of aligning with our values. I mean, for one thing, values are big ideas. And so we don't have to be totally gung-ho aligned with our values every single day. That would be almost impossible and very challenging, just given the demands that we're often under. But kind of thinking about day to day is like, okay, how do I sprinkle a little bit of my values in? Maybe you've identified your health is really important to you and you want to get more physically active or eat more nutritionally, making a plan for what that looks like for the day. You know, packing the gym bag in the car or packing the lunch. Just little ways to kind of sprinkle in the values. So as you look back at your day, like, okay, I did that. I planned it. I got it done. And I feel good about that. We can also do some gut checks with ourselves. So as we kind of go through our weeks or months or whatever interval makes sense, doing a little bit of a check-in with ourselves, like, did I live this day in a way and spend my time and energy that seems consistent with my values? If no, maybe we make a change for the next day or next week. If yes, gold star. And then we can also consider our self-care goals and ways we might pin our values onto that to help really enhance our practice and make it a little more likely that we'll carve out the time to do that even though we're under a lot of demands, or find creative ways to work in the self-care alongside the demands that we're under. All right, and now we'll shift to navigating some self-care during the winter holidays. I want to acknowledge that the holiday season can offer a lot of opportunities. For many people, it is a joyful time. We can always look forward to time with people we care about. Maybe we get a little time off from work or other demands. Maybe we get a little financial bump at the end of the year, which is always nice. Maybe we're social butterflies and really love all the holiday activities that go on and events that we can go to. However, for other people, the holiday season can feel really demanding and draining. And no matter what side or somewhere in the middle you fall when it comes to the holiday season, that is perfectly okay. We all have different approaches here. And it is, you know, for many a great time, and for many it's a challenging time. The holiday season, of course, is also a time where, you know, tough feelings come up, like loneliness or feeling separated from people we care about, and grief comes up a lot during the holiday season. So a little bit of a reminder to ourselves to practice compassion for ourselves and for others for whatever comes during the holiday season. And to really be mindful to carve out time for the self-care when our routines can feel really disrupted and up in the air, and we're making time for all the stuff we got to do or obligations. And let's talk a little bit about how our values can kind of help us during this time of year. But first, I want to highlight what might come up for us based on values during the holiday season. So let's take the example of holiday gift giving. Now let's imagine a person who really values generosity. We may know some of these people. They would just give us the shirt off their backs. They just love to give whatever resource that they have that is just strongly aligned with who they are, and they just love to be generous with time, money, whatever they got. And so for them, during the holiday season, they probably love finding gifts for others. They look for the perfect gift, can't wait to give it. They just really look forward to this time of year to be able to give to others. Whereas for others, for somebody else who maybe for whatever reason has a tough time feeling generous with money, or just really has a goal of saving for their future, and that really matters to them to, you know, be financially stable and maintain savings and what have you. Gift giving can feel very stressful, and this is where it can feel really misaligned with our values at this time of year, where we feel this pressure to give all these gifts, but at the same time we want to be saving our money, and it's like we just feel our soul leaving our body of every dollar that we see leaving our wallet during the holiday season. It's just really tough. And so for that type of person, it might be worthwhile really thinking ahead of, are there other resources I have to offer besides monetary gifts? Can I talk with my family about, hey, could we find other ways to spend time with each other or volunteer our time in some way in order to align with a different value that might be more meaningful for this time of year? All right, and other ways to kind of infuse our values in the holiday season, I think planning ahead goes a really long way. So sitting down with yourself or sitting down with loved ones and saying, hey, what really matters at this time of year? What do we want to make sure we do? What traditions do we want to maintain? Who do we want to make sure we see? Like, what do we got to do? And then schedule and protect time for those activities. Or things. If it's, you want to put away certain money or donate certain money, make sure you're doing that. Okay, so get that done. Make sure that that is on the top priority list. Make sure everybody's on board and supporting each other and getting those things done. Now, there are certainly things that come up at this time of year that do not matter, but simply got to be done. Those are the things that we can think about delegating or dividing and conquering. If there's ways to kind of divide time or, attend chunks of these activities, but kind of leave at, after a certain time period or things like that. We don't have to be, full in for some of these activities. And then there are those activities that don't matter and also do not have to be done. And those are the activities to sort of let go of the compulsion to say yes and instead simply say, I'm sorry, I don't have the time for this at this time of year. Simply say no, or just delete the activities. They don't got to be done. And this is the boundary setting around kind of taking care of yourself. If you need to take time to protect your routine or family or others' routine at this time of year, it is okay to say no if it does not matter. And then adding on to our practice that we did at the beginning here, a very, very simple self-care exercise we can do with ourselves. If we are offered an opportunity or asked to do something at this time of year, it is okay to pause, say, let me think about this for a moment, take a deep breath, center yourself in the here and now, connect with something that feels important to you, and then make a choice about how you want to move forward. I wanted to end this by sharing a few resources. If you're interested in learning more about values, I've included this VA resource that has lots of different values identification exercises within it. There's also a mobile app that is disseminated by the VA. It is freely available. It is a little bit outdated, so it looks like an older type of app, but hey, all the information in it is great. And as you can see on the image there, it has the different kind of life domains, and you can identify values that are important to you, and it's a really nice tool that includes other skills in it as well in terms of mindfulness and acceptance. And then other acceptance and commitment therapy minded books, particularly if you're looking to learn more about this, or if you know folks in your life who really love therapy, self-care, self-improvement. These books are great to check out for perhaps holiday gifting, but The Happiness Trap, Your Life on Purpose, and then Stress Less and Live More are all great to check out. With that, I want to thank you all for your attention. And I love to talk about self-care, so happy to open it up for questions or discussion.
Yeah, and if you do have a question, go ahead and toss it in the chat, and we will see how many of these we can get to. I did toss that Whole Health Library link in the chat just for convenience to our audience, as well as the book titles. I didn't get the entire book titles, but at least the spot before the colon. So I'm going to go ahead and slide just one further so people can take a look at that. Again, if you have questions, toss them in the chat. I'll just go ahead and start things off. So Is there a time of year, and maybe it is this holiday season, when self-care is neglected the most?
Well, I do think it is the holiday season. I think we also see a lot of self-care get neglected. I'm thinking a lot of what I kind of see in clinical settings around that. I think people term it like the Mayvember time of year when kids are getting out of school and maybe around the time folks are starting school. So when there's a lot of shifts in our routine, which tends to happen right around this holiday season, maybe around the new year or winter time. And then like those times just that kind of get cut up based on academic schedules or work schedules. That's when we tend to see self-care go out the window a little bit because it's really tough to make changes in our routine.
And I'll follow that up with, is there one characteristic, because you had a whole bunch of them on the one slide, is there one characteristic of self-care, or maybe a couple, that are more important than some of the others? I know you said that it depends on the person, but do you see kind of consistency between individuals?
I don't think so. I think this is very personal, and I think we have to tailor this conversation, to each person or relationship that we're dealing with. So there, I'm what's coming to my mind right now is, we see a lot of folks in our clinic that, for health reasons, they're pursuing weight loss. And so in talking with them, all right, like what's, that's a goal, what's underlying this, this goal you have of weight loss, and why is it important for you to kind of take care of yourself in that way? And then, sometimes there's consistent answers like, longevity or being around my family or things like that. But, it's very individual. I will say, we are social beings and creatures, and so oftentimes it is kind of our connections and responsibilities to others that tend to come up as particular values, just in terms of consistency.
And I know you mentioned saying no is okay. Is there advice on how to say no?
I always tell folks that clear is kind. So I feel like a lot of us, and particularly those of us who are women, have a really hard time saying no. And we may dance around it and say like, oh, let me think about that, or oh, and we sort of hope it like won't come back and to us. I think it is important to simply be clear. Like, I'm not able to commit to this. I don't have the time. Boom. Nobody can really kind of come back and say much about that. It's very clear. It's kind. If you want to offer, I'd be happy to offer you something next week or at a different time when you feel like you will have the bandwidth. That's okay. You don't have to. You're not, imposed to do something like that. So simply being clear. And yes, as person in the chat said, you don't need to explain.
Were you surprised in that second poll that we tossed out? And I've got the information right in front of you. You do, if there are any questions, go ahead and toss them in the chat. The question was, what is your biggest challenge in maintaining self-care during the holiday season? And 60% said lack of time. Financial stress, family obligations were lagging way behind at about 15%. Does that surprise you that the audience picked that overwhelmingly?
No. No, because again, going back to, for one reason or another, this idea of self-care has really been associated with like indulgence and selfishness. And so it's like we wait around for kind of this permission to come up to, allowing us to engage in self-care. And I think if we do that, we're never going to really find the time to do it. And there are so many demands on us. We use them up in giving our time to others and our responsibilities, and our self-care tends to be the first thing to go when we get stressed. And so, definitely not surprised that time was the big thing. I'm also not surprised that, the financial strain was second. Again, kind of going back to the idea that we tend to really glom onto this idea that self-care has to be this extravagant thing that we do for ourselves, when in fact, taking 5 minutes to breathe or really center ourselves is a self-care activity. taking 20 minutes to go for a walk is self-care. And so kind of reframing those ideas around what self-care is, I think, is also a helpful thing for us to do to get around some of those challenges that come up for us at this time of year.
And I hopefully this webinar was insightful for our audience and gave some advice on how to tackle the holiday season, and which is starting right now. Dr. Crockett, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Thank you. Thank you all for your participation in the chat, and happy taking care of yourselves.
Happy holiday season, and a quick reminder to today's webinar guests. We'll be uploading today's presentation onto our website. Once it's ready, you'll get an email once that link is good to go. We'd love for you to come back for these upcoming webinars through our office. On December 3rd, you're invited to return for Sweat for Sanity, exploring the transformative impact of exercise on mental health, where we'll learn ways how to help reduce stress, anxiety, and depression through movement. Then on January 9th, the new year starts off with taking charge of your career, improving confidence. Through this presentation, we'll explore imposter syndrome and what you can do about it. On January 21st, the science of returns. Join us for the science of oral health and how bad breath could tell you if something about your overall health, where we'll get practical tips on how to prevent oral diseases. And on February 12th, we'll host the science of insomnia. Come back as we gain a better understanding of sleep, its function, and how it supports our health and well-being. Register for those and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. And if you're looking for something to do tomorrow night, hey, join us. Join us at the Florentine in downtown Birmingham for Uncork Education. Tickets to attend the scholarship fundraiser are $60 and include food, drinks, and more. We'll have craft beer, we'll have wine, we'll have other cocktails. We'll also have spirit-free options. Come out and help support student scholarships at the Florentine tomorrow night. Registration is open at alumni.uab.edu/Uncork2024. As we close, tell us how we're doing. The QR code on your screen is going to take you to a short survey where you can share your thoughts with us. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, go Blazers.